Good evening, and welcome to the Indiana University Cinema's virtual screening room. Please note that live automatic captioning is available for tonight's event. To turn on captions, move your mouse to the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen, click on Live Transcript, then click Show Subtitle. If you have any issues accessing this feature, please feel free to ask a question using the Q&A box, which is also found at the bottom of your screen. Before we begin, IU Cinema wishes to acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities native to the region, recognizing the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people on whose ancestral homelands and resources Indiana University is built. We encourage each of you to reflect on the land from which you are watching tonight. My name is Elizabeth Rell, and I am the lead house manager at IU Cinema and co-host of A Place for Film, the IU Cinema podcast. As always, we miss being with all of you in person, but we're so happy to have you with us virtually, and we hope you and your loved ones are staying healthy and well. On behalf of the entire IU Cinema team, we'd like to thank you for being here for tonight's screening of the 1959 film Room at the Top as a part of our City Lights film series in partnership with the Media School. To introduce the film tonight, I'd like to welcome Joanna Cromeck. Joanna is a PhD candidate studying rhetoric and composition in the English department at Indiana University, and she has been a volunteer City Lights organizing committee member since 2018. Please welcome Joanna Cromeck.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Again, I want to sort of welcome everyone to tonight's screening of Room at the Top and just sort of begin my short introduction. Now, I think a good way for us to get started would be first to provide just a tiny little bit of historical background, namely the emergence of the British New Wave, which will help to contextualize the origins of this film. To begin, Room at the Top was directed by Jack Clayton and released in 1959, as you probably already know. It was actually adapted from a 1957 novel by the same name, which was written by John Brain. Set in 1940s, Yorkshire, England, Room at the Top follows Joe Lampton, played by Laurence Harvey, a young man who moves from his village home of Dufton to Warnley, where he's in search of a better prospect, right, as he works for the municipal treasury department. Now, Joe is an orphan. As we learn, his parents were killed during an air raid on his small factory hometown, and I mention this important piece of background because the film really struggles to reconcile Joe's quest for upward mobility. I don't think that it's a spoiler to say that Joe struggles with his own ability to adapt to the social milieu of the upper crust. He's transgressive of the physical borders imposed on his working class background. And while we quickly find out that Joe does indeed secure a room at the top in his New Warnley apartment, his discomfort remains clear when he moves between the decimated wasteland of Dufton and the social scene of Warnley. Nevertheless, we witness Joe's movement between these physical and social borders, and what ultimately marks Room at the Top as a defining film of the British New Wave is Joe's transgressions of romantic borders. So the crux of the film really centers on Joe's romantic triangle, and the film's attention to sex and the different relationships offered by Joe's partners reflects Joe's need to navigate the tension and the pull toward an affluent society with its sterile world of new materialism, and the more romantic desire to seek authenticity, remain true to the desires of the individual self. Now, the British New Wave was touted by critics as revolutionary primarily because of its realist portrayal of the working class struggle, and, as I just mentioned, because of its attention to the taboo topic of sex. More recent scholarship revisits and sort of contextualizes these British New Wave films, however, points out that many, like Room at the Top, were in fact adaptations of plays and popular fiction whose content was already addressing social protests and class struggle while highlighting the figure of the angry young man, which we'll see as very evident in Joe. In fact, when discussing British New Wave, both critics of the time and contemporary scholars adopt a then popular playwright term of kitchen sink drama, which was defined by a gritty social realism of the working class. Even if The Angry Young Man and The Kitchen Sink Drama were terms adopted from these other mediums of literature and theater, and then applied to British cinema by the commercial media, and de facto sort of translating these terms to invent the British New Wave, the themes are undeniably present. In fact, film scholar Neil Signoret, who conducted a comprehensive study of the British critical response to this film, points out that reviewers oftentimes described Room at the Top as both adult and frank. Now, while British critics lauded The Room at the Top as groundbreaking primarily because of its content, which signaled this sort of turning point for the emergence of the British New Wave, a present-day audience, much like the folks in the Zoom room, might find that the film's conservatism sort of sidesteps and fails to address real issues of social inequities that structure the struggles of the working class, gender expectations, patriarchal norms. So while the surface of Room at the Top may be transgressive, its characters seem to be choiceless, and their actions are continually premeditated by the class structures and social roles that define them. As contemporary film critic and scholar Barton Palmer points out, with its avoidance of complex social issues and its reliance on romantic plotting, Room at the Top captures the emotional tone and utopian vision of post-war dissatisfaction with the class system, offering ultimately a cautionary tale that identifies the dangers of pursuing upward mobility instead of emotional transformation. That being said, I hope that you enjoy this viewing of Room at the Top and that it inspires further investigations about the broader cultural context of the British New Wave and what cinematic representations of today's angry young man might ask us to question and consider. Thank you all for listening and for the opportunity to introduce this classic. A big thank you to IU Cinema, the David S. Bradley Collection, and City Lights for supporting this screening. I hope that you all enjoy Room at the Top as much as I do. And I want to turn it over back to Elizabeth. Thank you again.
Thank you, Joanna, for that wonderful introduction. To see more information on our upcoming screenings, you can visit our website at cinema.indiana.edu. The website for Room at the Top will appear on screen momentarily. It will also be linked in the chat for your convenience. Please note this web address must be entered into the web address bar at the top of your internet browser. It will not work if you type it into a search engine. There will not be a Q&A after the film tonight, but if you have any questions about accessing the film, our house staff will be monitoring the Q&A found at the bottom of your screen for the next 10 minutes. To all of you who tuned in tonight, thank you once again for being with us. Be well, be kind to yourselves and others. Have a great night.